The contingency of the knife. For the next 15 years, Elijah Thorne lived the quiet life of Professor Elias Thayer at a small college in rural Massachusetts. He taught geometry, translated classical texts, and in the evenings meticulously maintained the final physical piece of the secret, the microscripted vellum containing the precise coordinates of xylos, sealed within the brass hilt of his favorite surveying knife. He knew Jefferson's silence was the greatest shield, but presidents, like men, were mortal. Jefferson retired, then Madison, then Monroe. The secret remained buried, known only to Elijah and the aging, increasingly forgetful Thomas Jefferson, whose private cipher on Western geographical anomalies remained undeciphered in his locked strongbox. Meanwhile, the Republic fulfilled the manifest destiny Elijah had helped shape with his lies. Settlers poured west along the Missouri, following the maps that showed safe, mundane terrain where the ghost meridian lay hidden. The vastness of the American interior was being tamed, inch by inch, and the city of Xylos remained undisturbed. But the Winter Heart had left a legacy. In the years following its destruction, scientists began noting peculiar, unseasonal shifts in northern continental weather patterns. Severe, rapid cold snaps plagued the upper Midwest, followed by periods of abnormal thaw. The engineered equilibrium was gone, replaced by volatile chaos. The price of destroying the impossible was the destabilization of the climate. Elijah, reading the meteorology reports, understood the truth. The Winter Heart, by containing and regulating the immense cold, had inadvertently stabilized the North American climate. Its destruction was an act of global consequence, an irreversible ripple effect. The rise of the younger Thorne. By 1822, Elijah's isolation was broken by a connection he could not deny: his 20-year-old nephew, David Thorne. David was a brilliant, restless, and ambitious young man, trained in mineralogy and engineering, who viewed the frontier not as a space to be settled, but as a problem to be solved through technology. David often wrote to his uncle, detailing his frustration with the slow pace of American progress. "Uncle Elias, the Republic is stagnant. We rely on steam engines and crude iron. The wealth of the West, the rumored geological anomalies, the great salt plains, the crystalline caves, they hint at sources of material and energy that could leapfrog us over the entire British Empire. I believe the true wealth of the Louisiana Purchase remains hidden, deliberately unmapped." The mention of deliberately unmapped struck Elijah like a physical blow. He saw his younger self in David's ambition, the same relentless pursuit of the evidence over the convenient truth. In 1824, David announced his intention to join a private geological survey party heading into the contested Western Territories. Specifically, the region known on Elijah's false maps as the Sandstone Bluffs. David was hunting for exotic metallic ores, the type that fueled the industry of xylos. Elijah realized the secret was in mortal danger. If David's advanced geological surveys probed the region too deeply, the unique magnetic and geological signature of Xylos would inevitably be detected. The Star People, who had allowed one small reconnaissance team to flee, would certainly not tolerate a full-scale industrial excavation. Elijah had to act. He could not reveal the entire truth, but he could redirect David's ambition, using the destruction of the winter heart as a shield for the existence of Xylos. The revelation of the North. Elijah traveled to New York and met David. He presented himself not as a timid professor, but as the hardened surveyor he truly was. He locked the door of his room and pulled out a single, precise copy of Miriam Locke's schematics for the winter heart's core, the thermal regulator. "David," Elijah began, his voice gravelly with decades of suppressed silence, "the West holds a secret far greater than simple gold or silver. In 1806, I was part of a secret commission for President Jefferson. We found it, and we destroyed it." Elijah proceeded to tell David the edited truth, the discovery of the winter heart, the pale inhabitants, and the colossal engine of engineered cold. He stressed that they had acted to prevent this world-altering technology from falling into foreign hands, causing the permanent obliteration of the impossible city. He finished by showing David the schematics. "This, David, is the blueprint of a thermal manipulation device of unimaginable power. It could control the weather across the entire continent. If you want to find the future of American technology, you must abandon the West and focus on the residue of the North. The metals used in this mechanism, the chrome, the alloys, are of non-terrestrial origin. They are likely scattered across the area of the collapse." David Thorne, stunned, pored over the diagram, his engineer's mind instantly grappling with the impossible physics. "But this technology, it defies our understanding of energy transfer. If this existed, Uncle, then the people who built it, were they hostile?" "They were protective, David," Elijah corrected him, "and we were trespassers. Their power was absolute. But they are gone. Their debris is now a prize. Go north, David. Find the remnants of this city. Study the alloys. Reverse engineer the core. That is the only safe path to the kind of technological leap you desire." Elijah succeeded. He had diverted David's potentially lethal curiosity away from Xylos and toward the safe, inert debris field of the winter heart. David Thorne was now convinced that the North held the key, and the West was a dead end. The unveiling of the monolith. David Thorne formed his own expedition, funded by ambitious New York financiers, and headed north in 1825, searching for the metallic residue of the winter heart. Elijah, momentarily relieved, returned to his quiet life, but the peace was short-lived. In 1826, two pivotal events occurred. The death of the architect. Thomas Jefferson died on July 4th. His strongbox was opened, and his encrypted cipher on the Western anomalies was discovered. Although the cipher itself was unbreakable, the fact of its existence and its clear concern with hidden, non-tribal threats fueled intense speculation in Washington. The fissure. Reports filtered back from the deep west, near the coordinates of Xylos. Not from surveyors, but from cattlemen. They spoke of a strange localized earthquake that had created a massive, deep fissure in the plain, and that the air near the fissure felt sick and magnetic. Elijah knew instantly what had happened. Xylos was no longer entirely hidden. The star people had suffered a catastrophic seismic event that exposed their sanctuary. The earthquake had likely ruptured the engineered stone surrounding the luminous rock, revealing a part of the city. The secret was now held by chance, not by human design. Elijah knew he could not trust the government to respond correctly to a sudden, terrifying revelation. He retrieved his surveying knife, took a final deep breath, and set out west. He was no longer running from the secret. He was running toward the confrontation. The third passage. Elijah Thorne arrived in St. Louis in late 1826, an old man compared to the surveyor who had left 20 years prior, but with the same fire in his eyes. He quickly outfitted a new, tiny team, only a guide and one hardened packer. He was heading back to Sector X. He needed to assess the damage, confirm the exposure, and, if necessary, activate the ultimate contingency, the introduction of a counterforce against Xylos. As he traveled, the rumors grew darker. The exposed fissure, now dubbed the Scar by frontier settlers, was attracting intense, morbid curiosity. Tales emerged of strange, dark figures, the Star People, moving around the scar, seemingly attempting to repair the damage. The settlers, unable to comprehend the monolithic architecture, believed they had found a massive alien quarry worked by a non-human species. When Elijah finally reached the region, guided by his original, accurate coordinates, he found the place transformed. The mesa was still there, but the massive scar, a ragged tear 50 feet wide, ran directly down its flank. And standing beside the scar was an engineering marvel that had never been there before. A colossal, dome-shaped machine of black, polished metal. A monolith. The monolith was clearly a massive construction effort, a desperate attempt by the Star People to repair the geological damage and reseal the wound. It pulsed with a concentrated, agonizingly bright green light, draining energy from the luminous rock. Elijah realized the gravity of the situation. The Star People, exposed and vulnerable, were pouring all their energy into concealment. They were focused inward, not outward. But Elijah was not the only observer. Hidden in the shadows of the bluffs, watching the massive repair effort, was a figure Elijah immediately recognized, even after 20 years. Rock Rooker. The old scout, now grizzled and even more solitary, was not just watching. He was directing a small group of heavily armed men, mercenaries hired by unknown interests who were observing the monolith with calculating, avaricious intensity. Rooker had not been silent after all. He hadn't revealed the secret of Xylos, but he had waited, knowing that such a power, once seen, would eventually betray itself. He was now selling the opportunity to observe the exposed secret. Elijah knew then, the window of absolute secrecy was closed. The Republic was about to stumble into the Ghost Meridian. The Mercenaries' Bargain. Elijah Thorne remained concealed, observing Rock Rooker and his small group of heavily armed men. Rooker's crew was a mix of seasoned trappers and former military irregulars, men capable of serious frontier violence. Elijah understood Rooker's motivation, not scientific conquest, but pure high-stakes profit. Rooker was waiting for the monolith repair effort to be completed, or for the Star People to show a sign of weakness, at which point he would likely attempt to seize control of the valuable exposed materials. Elijah decided on a risky approach: confrontation. He needed to neutralize Rooker without alerting the Star People of Xylos, whose focus was entirely on the massive repair effort. He waited until nightfall. The monolith glowed intensely green, illuminating the mesa with an eerie, sickly light. Rooker's men were settled in a shallow cave, resting before a predicted final push. Elijah moved silently, approaching the cave entrance. He stepped into the firelight, his old surveying knife, the hilt containing the true coordinates, held loosely in his hand. "Silas," Elijah said, his voice quiet but commanding, using the name only the original detachment knew. Rock Rooker instantly snapped his rifle up, his hardened eyes narrowed. "Thorne, Professor Thayer, didn't think I'd see your ghost out here. Figured you were teaching children geometry." "I'm here to clean up the mess you waited 20 years to make, Silas," Elijah countered, glancing at the armed men. "You know what that is. You know what it can do. You saw it vaporize a boulder. You know the price of disturbing them. Why risk it?" Rooker lowered his rifle slightly, a bitter smile twisting his face. "Because, Professor, the price of not risking it is being a poor man in a rich man's world. They are weak now, exposed. They are pouring every erg of that green light into that black machine. I figure whatever is inside that scar, the pure ore, the glowing rock itself, is worth more than the Republic's entire treasury. You think you can breach a city of grown stone that controls geology? I don't need to breach the city, Thorne," Rooker sneered. "I just need a few pounds of that glowing rock from the exposed fissure, and I've got buyers. Rich men in Europe, rich men in New York, men who don't care about President Jefferson's secrecy. They want the power, and I'm going to deliver. You think you can breach a city of grown stone that controls geology? I don't need to breach the city, Thorne," Rooker sneered. "I just need a few pounds of that glowing rock from the exposed fissure, and I've got buyers. Rich men in Europe, rich men in New York, men who don't care about President Jefferson's secrecy. They want the power, and I'm going to deliver. You think you can breach a city of grown stone that controls geology? I don't need to breach the city, Thorne," Rooker sneered. "I just need a few pounds of that glowing rock from the exposed fissure, and I've got buyers. Rich men in Europe, rich men in New York, men who don't care about President Jefferson's secrecy. They want the power, and I'm going to deliver." Elijah realized Rooker's plan was narrowly focused on resource extraction, not strategic attack. This gave Elijah an opening. "You won't make it to the fissure, Silas. The Star People have increased their perimeter patrols. I've seen them, silent, moving in the shadows. They won't vaporize you. They'll trap you. They'll use that sonic weapon again, or perhaps something new, now that they're cornered." Elijah paused, then lowered the stakes to the one thing Rooker understood: a guaranteed exit.
I know the safe way out, Silas. I have the true original maps of this entire region, the parts Jefferson forced me to scrub. I can get you out alive and with a believable story, but you leave this place now and you never return. You take a guaranteed payout from me, enough to disappear, and you leave this monolith alone. Rooker considered this. His ambition warred with his inherent caution. The memory of the sonic weapon was clearly etched in his mercenary mind. Finally, he nodded, spat on the ground, and said, "What's the price, Thorn? Not gold. You want something else. Your silence, and the guarantee that these men never speak of a black city or a green light. And you tell your buyers that the fissure was a hoax, a worthless vein of common obsidian." Rooker agreed. The transaction was made, a substantial portion of Elijah's life savings for the promise of immediate retreat and permanent silence. By dawn, Rooker and his men were gone, their short-lived siege of Xylos over.
The Surveyor's Prayer. With Rooker gone, Elijah was alone again, facing the vast, glowing enigma of the monolith. He knew the Star People were at their most vulnerable, exposed and focused on the repair effort. This was his opportunity to implement Jefferson's second order, find the weakness of Xylos. He spent the next 48 hours observing the colossal machine. The monolith was clearly a high-capacity energy conduit, pumping the concentrated green power from the luminous rock into the raw, fractured rock of the fissure, attempting to grow the stone back into a seamless seal. The Star People were working tirelessly, placing small, glowing stones into slots on the monolith's surface. These were likely power regulators or focal points. Elijah noticed a pattern in their movements and the way the green light pulsed. The energy flow was rhythmic, culminating in a powerful surge every 6 hours when the light turned briefly from green to an intense pulsating amber. He pulled out his specialized instruments. The magnetic field surrounding the monolith was immense, but during the amber pulse, the field momentarily dropped, almost to zero, as if the entire system was cycling or resetting. "A system cycle," Elijah muttered, recalling Miriam's notes on the winter heart. "A brief moment of thermal or energetic vulnerability." He realized the monolith itself was the weakness. It was a temporary, desperate measure by the Star People, and by concentrating all their energy into this single point of repair, they had created a massive target. Elijah's plan was not to destroy it as he had done with the Winter Heart. The consequences of disrupting Xylos's geological control could be catastrophic, perhaps triggering continental-scale earthquakes. His goal was to achieve a standoff, to force the Star People to acknowledge the Republic's power, or at least its capacity to interfere. He decided to target the monolith with the only non-lethal high-impact force he could manage: precise geometry. The geometric equation. Elijah knew the monolith was engineered to withstand immense kinetic force, but perhaps not a highly localized, high-frequency kinetic attack delivered at the moment of its energy cycle reset. He located a point on the cliff face directly above the monolith where the ground was stable, yet comprised of a dense layered granite. Using a series of careful calculations based on leverage and the monolith's known circumference, he determined the exact angle needed to strike the monolith at its highest point during the amber pulse. His only weapon was a carefully packed, powerful, but non-military charge of black powder, enough to dislodge a large section of rock, but not enough to cause an explosion that would breach the city itself.
The Star People, focused entirely on the monolith, still hadn't detected him. He moved silently, placing the charge into a carefully drilled borehole in the granite cliff face. He connected a long, slow-burning fuse. He waited for the next power cycle, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt the familiar high-frequency hum of the city increasing as the 6-hour mark approached. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the massive green glow of the monolith intensified, then flashed brilliantly, turning to the deep amber color. The magnetic hum instantly ceased. The reset had begun. Elijah lit the fuse. He ran, scrambling back across the plain, not looking back, his entire body rigid with terror and anticipation. The explosion, when it came, was not a massive boom, but a sharp, localized crack, precisely what Elijah had calculated. A tonnage of layered granite sheared from the cliff face and plunged directly onto the monolith. Elijah turned back just in time to see the impact. The monolith, designed to repair and grow stone, was not designed to withstand the rapid localized kinetic shock of millions of pounds of falling granite. The colossal black machine did not shatter. It simply stopped. The amber light instantly died, followed by the terrifying sight of the massive machine shuddering, then crumbling inward, collapsing on itself. The green light of the luminous rock, no longer channeled into the monolith, simply radiated from the fissure, bathing the entire mesa in an unrestrained, terrifying glow.
The silent retreat. The monolith was destroyed. The massive, focused energy of Xylos was now exposed and unstable. The reaction from the Star People was instantaneous and chilling. The silent figures working tirelessly near the monolith stopped. They turned their heads simultaneously toward the plain where Elijah was hiding. They made no aggressive move. They simply looked. Elijah felt a sharp, agonizing pressure in his head. The sonic weapon, deployed not as an attack, but as an overwhelming inquiry. It was a mental shout, asking, "Who are you? Why?" Elijah knew he had to establish the Republic's presence without communication. He raised the surveying knife, the one containing the final true coordinate, and held it high above his head for a single long moment, ensuring the Star People could see the metallic glint in the luminous rock's glow. Then he turned and ran, leaving no trace, no message, only the impossible destruction of the monolith. He had delivered the President's requested weakness. He had forced the Star People to stop their repair, assess the threat, and realize that their sanctuary was not inviolable. The Star People of Xylos were now aware of a sophisticated, capable threat: the American Republic, which had the capacity to interfere with their core technology. This was not a conquest, it was a deterrent. Elijah Thorne returned to the east for the final time, the true map of Xylos remaining a contingency in his knife hilt, the secret of the winter heart a blueprint in his mind. The final legacy. Elijah returned to his quiet life, but his actions had an immediate, profound effect. The Star People of Xylos, having been threatened at their most vulnerable point, did not retaliate. They did not attack the nearby settlements. Instead, they adapted. They began a new, slow, and meticulous campaign of hyper-concealment. They shifted their entire energy focus to sealing the fissure from within, using the luminous rock to grow a massive, self-repairing shield of black stone over the wound. From 1827 onward, the mesa where Xylos lay became impossible to approach, not through violence but through engineered defense. Unpredictable, localized magnetic fields emerged, causing compasses to spin wildly and metal objects to heat up dangerously. The air above the mesa caused rapid, debilitating vertigo. The Star People had built a perfect, impenetrable shield of distortion and discomfort. The settlers called the area the Mesa of Madness and avoided it entirely. The truth of the Ghost Meridian was sealed again, this time by the Star People themselves, in direct response to Elijah Thorne's intervention. Elijah lived out his years knowing he had traded two world-altering secrets, one erased, one contained, for the security of the American experiment. He was the only person alive who knew the true geological and technological makeup of the Louisiana Purchase. He died in 1845, a respected, unassuming mathematics professor, leaving all his possessions, including his old surveying knife, to his ambitious nephew, David Thorne. The inheritance of secrets. David Thorne inherited his uncle Elias's estate in 1845. Amidst the mundane collection of books and mathematical instruments, he found the old surveying knife. Intrigued by the solid, heavy hilt, he disassembled it, revealing the tiny, waxed vellum scroll. He unrolled the scroll and stared at the microscript. It was a single, precise set of coordinates and a coded designation. Sector X, luminous rock / xylos, active geological control. David, now a successful consulting engineer who had spent the last 2 decades obsessed with reverse engineering the rumored northern winter heart alloys, was thunderstruck. The entire foundation of his life's work, the belief that the North held the only high-tech residue, was immediately challenged by this single piece of paper. He had never found a complete core, only scattered, highly purified chrome and white metal alloys that defied conventional metallurgy. The winter heart was gone, but its material legacy was powering the new generation of American rail and shipping. The vellum scroll presented a horrifying possibility. His uncle had lied to him, and the true active power lay in the West. David immediately cross-referenced the coordinates with his own extensive modern maps. The coordinates pointed directly to the infamous Mesa of Madness, the region the local tribes now simply called the Silent Peak, known for its intense magnetic and atmospheric distortions. He realized the true scale of his uncle's treason and his wisdom. Elias had not just hidden one secret, he had substituted one destroyed secret, the Winter Heart, for a living, dangerous one, Xylos, saving David's life and securing the Republic's frontier for 20 years. The pressure of manifest destiny. By the 1850s, the Republic was expanding rapidly. The issue of slavery and its extension into the territories dominated national politics. The desire for a transcontinental railroad to link the burgeoning West Coast, California gold rush, with the East was paramount. The single most difficult obstacle for the proposed southern route was, geographically, the territory that contained the Mesa of Madness. Surveyors attempting to chart the optimal path for the rail line consistently reported magnetic interference that ruined their compasses, bizarre atmospheric pressure changes, and strange, inexplicable heating of their equipment. The Mesa of Madness was a literal impediment to manifest destiny. David Thorne was brought in as a technical consultant to the War Department and the Railroad Consortium.
His task, to find a technological solution to the magnetic anomalies of the West. He presented his findings, carefully edited, to the War Secretary. "Sir, the magnetic distortions near the proposed southern route are not geological, but engineered," David stated, holding the attention of the nervous room. "They are highly localized, intense fields generated by a massive, high-capacity electrical generator deep within the mesa. It is a defense system designed to repel trespassers." He deliberately used the term electrical generator, a concept familiar to the 1850s, rather than luminous rock or geological control. He argued that the generator was likely abandoned, but still running, a relic of an ancient unknown civilization. "We cannot fight this technology, gentlemen," David concluded, "but we can circumvent it. I propose the creation of shielded survey teams using advanced nickel-iron alloys, metals I have been studying, to neutralize the magnetic interference. We must find the perimeter of the defense and chart a course around the mesa, giving it a wide berth." His plan was accepted. David's true motive, to utilize the resources of the Republic to map the defensive perimeter of Xylos without triggering a confrontation, thereby fulfilling his uncle's legacy of silence and security.
The Northern Countermeasure. As David's shielded survey teams began their meticulous work in the West, charting the no-go zone around Xylos, a new problem arose in the North. The unpredictable weather effects caused by the destruction of the Winter Heart in 1806, the extreme sudden cold snaps, were now directly impacting the northern rail routes and the nascent farming economy. The U.S. government was desperate for a solution. David realized the only way to manage the long-term containment of Xylos was to reveal a portion of the Winter Heart's power, not for destruction, but for stabilization. He submitted a highly confidential proposal to the Secretary of War, a program to build localized, small-scale versions of the thermal regulator based on his de facto reverse engineering of the alloys and schematics he inherited from Elias and Miriam. He did not call them thermal regulators. He called them atmospheric stabilizers. His plan was to use the materials recovered from the Winter Heart debris field to construct small, self-contained units that could locally mitigate the extreme cold snaps. He knew this was a terrible risk, revealing the technology of one star people to stabilize the damage caused by its destruction. But it was necessary to secure the North and maintain the credibility of his engineering work. The first atmospheric stabilizer was built in a heavily guarded government facility in 1858. When activated, the device successfully drew cold from the surrounding air, creating a small, localized zone of temperate climate. The Star People science, once a secret and a threat, was now being used by the Republic to manage the very consequences of its own ignorance. The shadow of war. The success of the stabilizer project brought David immense power and classified access, but it also placed him in the crosshairs of a conflict he was trying desperately to avoid: the American Civil War. As the nation fractured in 1861, both the Union, North, and the Confederacy immediately recognized the strategic value of David Thorne's two secret projects. The Xylos containment. The South needed the transcontinental rail route to link Texas and California gold to its war effort. If the Mesa of Madness was a technological barrier, they needed to either neutralize it or find a way through it. The stabilizer.
The North, with its superior industry, was focused on leveraging the stabilizer technology for military applications, specifically for creating massive localized cold fields to halt Confederate troop movements in winter, or conversely, for creating intense heat for smelting and manufacturing. David, a staunch Unionist, was immediately seized upon by Lincoln's War Cabinet. They demanded he weaponize the stabilizer technology and reveal the exact nature and location of the Western generator so the Union could secure it or destroy it before the Confederacy realized its strategic value. Mr. Thorne, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton pressed him, his voice echoing in the White House cabinet room. You have contained a force field out west, and you have a machine that controls temperature. We are in a war for the survival of this republic. You will tell us everything. David, facing the ultimate moral test, stood firm in his uncle's legacy. He had to continue the lie. The Mesa of Madness is not a weapon, sir. It is an impenetrable defense that will vaporize any force sent against it. If the Confederacy tries to breach it, they will simply destroy themselves. The best strategy is containment. The Mesa is now an active, lethal barrier separating the two sides, acting as a buffer for the entire West. He successfully convinced the Union leadership that the Mesa of Madness was too dangerous for either side to touch. The secret of Xylos remained a lethal no man's land, an invisible protector of the continent's security. But the stabilizer technology, the Winter Heart's legacy, was now officially mobilized for war.
The weaponization of cold. David was forced to oversee the rapid expansion of the stabilizer program. The War Department wanted a large-scale field-deployable unit, a mobile engine capable of generating a battlefield-sized zone of lethal cold. The result was the Polaris unit, a massive steam-powered apparatus capable of generating an instantaneous drop in temperature by 50 degrees Fahrenheit across a quarter-mile radius. The Polaris unit was deployed only once, in the brutal winter of 1862, near the contested rail hub of Chattanooga. The deployment was a tactical success, but a moral catastrophe. The Union forces, using the extreme engineered cold, successfully halted a massive Confederate advance. The sudden drop in temperature caused massive frostbite, equipment failure, and near instantaneous hypothermia among the Southern troops. But the technology was unstable. The localized thermal disturbance created a rapid, uncontrolled reverse effect. The extreme cold was followed by an equally sudden, unnatural heat wave that crippled the Union's own logistics trains. David witnessed the destruction. He realized that the Star People of the North were not merely technicians, they were engineers of balance. Their colossal Taurus was designed for slow, measured regulation. The hurried weaponization by the Union was crude, volatile, and devastating to the balance of nature. The Union immediately halted the field deployment of the Polaris unit. The technology was deemed too unpredictable and too dangerous to use against fellow Americans. The legacy of the Winter Heart had proven itself too mighty for human war. The war ended in 1865. The Republic survived. But the two great secrets of the interior, the contained power of Xylos and the chaotic residue of the Winter Heart, had actively shaped the conflict, limiting the scope of its expansion and forcing both sides to retreat from absolute technological warfare. David Thorne, the engineer, became the secret guardian of the technological balance. He knew that neither power was truly secure. Xylos was merely waiting, and the blueprints of the Winter Heart were now in government hands, ready to be rediscovered and misused. The Peace of Containment. The years following the Civil War ushered in the age of Reconstruction, industrial expansion, and relative quiet on the matter of the two secret civilizations. David Thorne became a powerful, behind-the-scenes figure, a scientist bureaucrat who personally oversaw the containment of both the Xylos secret and the Winter Heart legacy. The Mesa of Madness remained a massive, self-sustaining magnetic anomaly, successfully pushing the transcontinental railroad routes to the north and south, effectively creating a technological buffer zone that prevented settlement in the immediate vicinity of Xylos. David's containment strategy had worked. The Star People were safe, and the Republic was safe from them. However, the blueprints of the Polaris unit, the weaponized thermal regulator, remained in the War Department's classified archives. David knew the technology was a loaded gun, waiting to be picked up by the next ambitious general or industrialist. To permanently secure the secret, David embarked on a quiet, two-pronged disinformation campaign. Decommissioning the Polaris unit. He systematically introduced intentional, subtle flaws into the operational and maintenance manuals of the Polaris unit, ensuring that any future attempt to activate the massive machine would result in catastrophic mechanical failure rather than a controlled thermal effect. Redefining the North. He successfully lobbied Congress to establish the Northern Territories, the debris field of the Winter Heart, as a national geodetic preserve, citing the need to study the unique metallic alloys found there. This made large-scale excavation and recovery of the Star People's remnants impossible without a direct act of Congress. By the 1870s, David had achieved a fragile equilibrium. Xylos was geographically sealed, and the Winter Heart technology was bureaucratically neutralized and mechanically corrupted.
The Scholar and the Cipher. The equilibrium began to fail with the rise of modern American academic history. The great-nephew of Thomas Jefferson, Dr. Nathaniel Vance, an obsessive historian and linguist, spent his life dedicated to deciphering the confidential ciphers left in the late president's strongbox. Jefferson's journals had repeatedly mentioned a key to a Western geographical anomaly, a key he referred to as the geometry of Elias. In 1878, after 2 decades of painstaking work, Vance broke the Jefferson cipher. The decoded documents did not reveal the identity of the Star People or the existence of Xylos, but they did reveal the chilling fact that a highly sophisticated, non-tribal civilization existed in the purchase, and that it was actively concealed by a man named Elias Thayer, Elijah Thorne's academic alias. Vance, armed with this terrifying historical context, began searching for the true identity of Elias Thayer. His search led him directly to David Thorne, who had inherited all of Elias's belongings. In 1879, Vance approached David in his Washington office, a folder of decoded Jeffersonian correspondence in his hand. Mr. Thorne, I believe your deceased uncle, Elias there, was the most important and most dishonest cartographer in American history, Vance stated, placing the cipher documents on the desk. President Jefferson hid a civilization. I need to know why and where. David, now an old man himself, knew the moment had come. The secret could no longer be contained by silence alone. Dr. Vance, David responded quietly. The men of that generation, my uncle included, understood that some truths are too large for a young republic. The cost of revealing what we know is the destruction of our world order. David then made a calculated decision. He would reveal the Winterheart story again as a shield for Xylos, but this time he would present it as the only hidden threat. He wanted Vance to pursue a dead end, leaving Xylos undisturbed. He handed Vance a copy of the thermal regulator schematics. Your anomaly, Doctor, was a machine that controlled the climate. My uncle destroyed it in the north. We have since weaponized and then neutralized its residue. The threat is gone, but the history remains a vital secret. Vance, a historian, was momentarily stunned by the sheer technological marvel of the schematics. He accepted David's explanation. The destruction of a massive climate machine was a secret worthy of Jefferson's silence. He focused his obsession on the extinct northern threat. The danger seemed to have passed again. David successfully deflected a historical inquiry using the same secret his uncle had used against him.
The Star People's Envoy. The true turning point in the Xylos secret did not come from a historian or a general, but from the Star People themselves. In 1881, a surveyor working near the perimeter of the Mesa of Madness returned with an unbelievable tale. He had been stopped not by a magnetic field, but by a humanoid figure dressed in dark, flowing robes. The figure had spoken to the surveyor in perfect, if oddly accented French, a language Elijah and Toussaint had encountered decades ago. The message was simple and terrifying. The great wound is sealed. The monolith's destruction was an act of balanced aggression. The truce of non-interference is recognized, but the stolen code must be returned. Bring the Winterheart's design to the perimeter, or the truce is forfeit. The Star People of Xylos knew about the Winterheart. They knew of its blueprints, and they knew the destruction of the monolith had been deliberately calculated. They viewed the schematics of their rival civilization as a stolen code, a vital piece of technological intelligence now held by the Republic. The implication was clear. The two civilizations, Xylos, stone fire, and the Winterheart, glass ice, were not merely isolated anomalies. They were engaged in an ancient, silent technological Cold War, and the U.S. had inadvertently become the custodian of the key strategic weapon. David Thorne immediately grasped the catastrophic risk. The Star People were now using the destruction of the monolith, the very act that had secured the Republic's peace, as a basis for technological blackmail. He had to return the schematics to Xylos. 37. The Final Journey. David Thorne, now in his late 60s, undertook the final journey to the Mesa of Madness. He carried 3 things: the original, meticulously copied schematics of the thermal regulator core, the stolen code; the original surveying knife from his uncle, Elijah Thorne, containing the final microscripted coordinates; a highly refined prototype of his own creation, a device built from Winterhart alloys designed to neutralize the magnetic field of Xylos for a brief moment. He traveled alone, understanding this was a one-way trip, a final act of devotion to his uncle's legacy of national security. He approached the Mesa perimeter using his magnetic nullifier, slipping past the intense fields that repelled all other visitors. He located the exact spot where the star person had intercepted the surveyor. He did not wait. He simply activated a small distress flare, sending a plume of red smoke into the air above the silent peak. Within minutes, 3 figures in dark robes emerged from the shimmering heat distortion near the Mesa base. They moved with the same quiet, impossible grace Elijah had witnessed 78 years earlier. The central figure stopped 10 yards away. Its eyes, visible beneath the shadowed hood, were ancient, calculating, and utterly devoid of fear. "You are the son of the one who stole the silence," the figure said, its voice a synthesized whisper. David walked forward and laid the thick packet of schematics on a smooth, flat rock. "This is the stolen code," David said. "It is the complete design for the Winterhart's core. We used it to create weapons. We used it to stabilize our climate. We return it now as an act of non-aggression and a demand for continued peace." The star person did not touch the schematics. Instead, it raised its hand, and the package of papers lifted off the rock, suspended in the air. The figure studied the papers not with its eyes, but with a palpable, invisible energy. After a long moment, the star person lowered the package and spoke, the synthesized whisper carrying immense authority. "The Xylos Code and the Winterhart Code are 2 halves of the Great Balance. When the balance is broken, both civilizations are vulnerable. Your republic broke the Winterhart, and then broke our shield. Now you have returned the key to its resurrection. The debt is paid." The exchange. The star person then made an astonishing gesture. It pointed to the massive Mesa of Madness and, with a subtle movement of its hand, the entire mountain seemed to sigh. The intense magnetic field, the atmospheric distortion, all the aggressive engineered defenses ceased. The mesa became geographically normal, a silent, black mountain. "The defenses are removed," the star person announced. "We recognize the non-interference. We return to the silence. But we give you a final warning, Thorne. The code you returned can be used by us to reconstruct the Winterhart, restoring the great balance." Then the figure moved to a small crystalline pedestal which had seemingly materialized from the ground. It placed a single object on the pedestal, a smooth, metallic sphere of the purest, dull black material, an alloy of xylose. This is a fragment of the luminous rock, the figure said, not as a weapon, but as a signal. If the equilibrium of the continent is threatened again, if the stolen code is misused, this sphere will activate. It will glow green, and the silence will end. This is our final treaty with the Republic. David took the sphere. It was impossibly light, yet radiated a sense of dense, focused energy. He then took his final piece of evidence, the surveying knife. He handed it to the star person. The man who started this, my uncle, was buried believing he had secured the silence. He left one final, absolute coordinate here. David gestured to the hilt. Keep it. Let history only know that the continent had secrets. The star person took the knife and studied the hilt. We know Elias Thorne. He drew the borders of the world for his people. He was a good enemy. With that, the three figures turned and ascended the face of the now inert mesa, fading into the seamless black rock. David Thorne, carrying the black sphere, watched as the city of Xylos, the ghost meridian, returned to its perfect, absolute silence. The architects of silence. David Thorne returned east and sealed his final report directly to the president, detailing the complete history of both star peoples, the exchange, and the new black sphere deterrent. He reported that the Mesa of Madness was no longer a technological threat, but a natural, mineral-rich deposit, finally clearing the way for the Transcontinental Railroad to take the southern route. The U.S. government accepted the official story. The railroad was built. America expanded from coast to coast. The Mesa of Madness became a landmark, but nothing more. The True Chronicle of the Louisiana Purchase, a story of two impossible ancient civilizations, their technological war, and the two generations of American surveyors who risked everything to keep them secret, was buried forever. Elijah Thorne and David Thorne became the true silent architects of American expansion, not by conquering the frontier, but by containing the impossible powers that lay within it. The Republic's survival was never based on its technological superiority, but on the profound strategic lie that allowed it to grow in the shadow of giants. The Black Sphere was sealed in the highest-level vault of the War Department, forgotten until the next time the Republic's hunger for power threatened the delicate, ancient balance maintained in the silent heart of the continent. The Vault and the Vigil. The Black Sphere deterrent, the fragment of the luminous rock from Xylos, was placed deep within the vault of the newly established Department of Defense Archives in 1883. It was catalogued under the cryptic designation Artifact 781A, Western Geodetic Anomaly, Active Containment Trigger. It was forgotten. David Thorne, like his uncle, faded into quiet retirement, and the official memory of the War Department prioritized naval expansion and international conflicts over the strange geological history of the interior. The secret, guarded by 2 generations of surveyors, now rested on the indifference of a growing military bureaucracy. However, the artifact had a silent guardian. Eleanor Vance, the daughter of the late historian Nathaniel Vance. Eleanor, following her father's death, inherited his obsession with the Jefferson cipher and the anomaly. She spent her career as a low-ranking but persistent archivist within the Department of Defense, dedicating her life to tracking the few surviving documents related to Elias and David Thorne. Eleanor was the only person who understood the sphere's purpose. She knew it was not a relic of war, but a delicate instrument of peace. A technological treaty signed between the United States and a power it could not comprehend. For decades, the sphere sat inert on its velvet cushion, absorbing the fluorescent light of the secure vault. The age of disregard. The 20th century arrived, bringing global conflict, atomic power, and technological hubris. The military establishment, armed with radio and flight, dismissed the idea of a silent, technologically superior civilization hidden within the heart of the continent. The coordinates of Xylos were now meaningless, listed simply as an unusable mineral claim due to the geological instability reported in the 1870s. In the 1950s, during the Cold War, the paranoia surrounding nuclear secrets led to a massive purge of classified files deemed irrelevant or too fantastical. Artifact 781A was slated for disposal, to be melted down and repurposed for conventional military alloys. Eleanor Vance, now an elderly, frail woman, mounted a desperate bureaucratic defense. She used every connection, every obscure regulation, and every archived letter from David Thorne, arguing that the artifact was essential for studying unique Precambrian magnetic resonance patterns. She managed to save the sphere, but the victory was temporary. The sphere was moved from the high-security vault to a neglected, climate-controlled sub-basement, labeled as an unclassified research sample. The two great secrets were now at their weakest point of containment: bureaucratic negligence. The discovery of the Winter Heart's residue. While the xylosphere was languishing in a basement, the legacy of the Winter Heart resurfaced. In 1968, a team of geophysicists working in the National Geodetic Preserve, the former Winter Heart debris field, discovered an unprecedented deposit of a non-terrestrial isotope concentrated in the remnants of the unique metallic alloys David Thorne had lobbied to protect. The discovery, initially published in an obscure scientific journal, detailed the potential for these alloys to create incredibly dense, energy-storing conduits. The paper contained reproductions of what the physicists called ancient, complex, mathematically precise schematics found in the area. The distorted, incomplete blueprints of the thermal regulator, originally created by Miriam Locke and Elijah Thorne. The military-industrial complex immediately recognized the significance. Here was a source of energy transfer and storage far exceeding conventional battery or superconductivity technology. The schematics were instantly classified. The United States began a secret, massive operation, Project Polaris II. The goal was to fully reverse engineer and weaponize the thermal control technology of the Winter Heart. They were not seeking to control the climate, but to create a localized, portable superweapon, an atmospheric manipulation device that could freeze or boil entire enemy installations instantly. The stolen code had been retrieved, and the great balance was about to be broken for the second time. The activation. The Polaris 2 scientists, blind to the true, catastrophic history of the technology, successfully constructed a functioning prototype of the thermal regulator core in 1974. It was housed in a massive, hidden facility deep in the Nevada desert. On October 23, 1974, the scientists initiated the first full-power test of the Polaris 2 prototype. The intention was to generate a controlled, localized cold field. But as the immense machine hummed to life, generating a familiar high-frequency resonance, the instability David Thorne had engineered into the original plans, the subtle, fatal flaws in the maintenance manuals, began to take effect. The machine did not generate controlled cold. It went into immediate, catastrophic feedback. Instead of regulating the thermal balance, the machine began to draw all available energy from its immediate surroundings, creating an unnatural, lethal atmospheric vacuum. The air itself was being violently drawn into the core. The test site was annihilated. The thermal regulator imploded, taking with it the entire facility, leaving behind a massive, super-chilled crater that remained unnaturally cold for years. The Winter Heart's legacy was still too volatile, too powerful for human hands. But the moment the Polaris 2 core went into destructive resonance, the moment the stolen code was deployed against the laws of the Great Balance, it sent a pulse, a shock wave that resonated through the Earth's core. The end of the silence. Thousands of miles away, in the forgotten sub-basement of the Department of Defense archives, Artifact 781A, the Black Sphere, reacted for the first time in 171 years. Eleanor Vance was in the sub-basement when it happened, organizing files. The Black Sphere began to glow. Not a harsh, bright light, but a slow, rhythmic, pulsating green glow. The unmistakable signature of the luminous rock of Xylos, finally activated by the catastrophic breakdown of its opposite. The sphere was not merely a threat deterrent. It was an early warning system for the collapse of the ancient, secret technological balance. Eleanor, her eyes wide with understanding and terror, knew the end of the long silence was here. The star people of Xylos, realizing the code of the Winter Heart had been misused for weaponization, would now act. They had promised to return to the silence, but the covenant was conditional. The green pulse grew stronger, vibrating on the velvet cushion. Eleanor rushed to the nearest classified terminal. She typed in the only coordinates she knew, Sector X, the Mesa of Madness. She attached the entire decoded history of Elijah and David Thorne, labeled simply, The True Chronicle. Her message was sent to the highest levels of the Pentagon. The artifact is active. The covenant is broken. The architects of silence have failed. Prepare for geological response. The geological response. The star people of Xylos were not interested in human warfare. They were interested in restoring the balance and protecting their secret. Within hours of the sphere's activation, massive, scientifically inexplicable seismic activity began to ripple across the United States. Not conventional earthquakes, but highly localized, geometrically precise geological movements. Along the Southern Transcontinental Railway route, the route that had circumvented the Mesa of Madness, the Earth began to move. Perfectly straight, massive fissures opened, severing the railroad lines and the major highway networks with surgical precision. Key military installations built on specific, sensitive geological faults were suddenly, violently undermined by rock liquefaction. The Star People were not attacking the population. They were isolating themselves. The Mesa of Madness, the site of Xylos, rose several hundred feet over the course of a night, becoming a massive, sheer-sided fortress, protected by an impenetrable, visible dome of shimmering green energy. It was no longer a hidden secret. It was a blatant, unassailable declaration of existence. The geological response was the final, overwhelming act of the ghost meridian. Xylos was now a permanent, impossible feature of the American landscape, a massive, untouchable island of technological supremacy in the heart of the Republic. The long silence was over. The era of the surveyor's secret ended, replaced by the terrifying reality of the Star People's overt, unstoppable power. The Republic, built on the lie of the mundane frontier, now faced the true, astonishing scope of its territory. The chronicle of the uncharted Republic was no longer a secret history. It was the foundation for a new, uncertain future, where America would have to coexist with the impossible power it had tried for 2 centuries to bury.
The Pentagon's bewilderment. The immediate aftermath of the geological response, dubbed the Mesa event by a frantic national press, plunged the U.S. government into chaos. The simultaneous, precision-cut fissures across key transportation arteries were not random, nor were they natural. Geologists reported observing metallic residue and unnaturally smooth fault lines, as if the planet's crust had been sliced by a titanic, invisible tool. In the Pentagon, the top brass and intelligence directors were paralyzed. Eleanor Vance, the elderly archivist, was brought before a special emergency joint committee. She was the only person with the context to explain the impossible. Holding the now inert black sphere, Eleanor laid out the entire history. Gentlemen, you have just witnessed a reaction to the misuse of technology stolen from a rival civilization, Eleanor explained, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. For 171 years, the survival of this republic was based on the lie that these 2 powers, Xylos and the Winterheart, did not exist. The surveyors, Elijah and David Thorne, maintained a delicate balance of silence. She detailed the destruction of the Winterheart in 1806, the containment of Xylos, the return of the stolen code in 1881, and the subsequent activation of Project Polaris II, the ultimate betrayal of the treaty. The Xylos Star People have honored the balance by avoiding human life, Eleanor concluded, They have merely sealed themselves off, making their location physically, technologically, and economically impossible to breach. The Mesa of Madness is no longer a hidden sanctuary. It is an overt declaration of sovereignty. The committee struggled with the sheer magnitude of the information. A secret civilization controlling geology, capable of rewriting the map of the continent overnight. The very foundation of U.S. power, industrial reach, and geographical superiority had been casually undermined. The new cartography. The first official act of the government was to create a new, classified map of the continental United States, incorporating the new reality. The map featured the immense, unassailable fortress of the Green Dome where Xylos lay, designated officially as Zone X, non-permeable sovereign territory. The lines drawn by the Star People were now the most permanent, unchangeable borders on the continent. The cartographic lie of the Thorns had become the absolute, terrifying truth. The political consequences were immense. The economic cost of rerouting major infrastructure was staggering. Furthermore, the knowledge that an advanced non-human power resided untouchable within U.S. borders instantly recalibrated global power dynamics. The U.S. was forced to admit, in secret communiques with its allies, the existence of an internal anomaly that negated its claim to absolute territorial control. The very concept of manifest destiny, the relentless march to the Pacific, was revealed to be an accidental gift granted by the tolerance of an ancient power, a power that had now run out of patience. The legacy of the surveyors. The final, lasting impact of the Thorn family's long secret was the establishment of a specialized, highly classified intelligence unit within the Pentagon, ironically named the Corps of Discovery 2. The unit's mission was not exploration, but observation and containment. It was staffed by elite geologists, linguists, and engineers, all trained in the history of the two star peoples, and all required to read the complete, unexpurgated Chronicle of the Uncharted Republic. Their first objective was to decipher the intent of Xylos's isolation. Were they preparing for war, or simply demanding privacy? The Corps of Discovery 2 found that the geological changes were purely defensive. The Star People had sealed the mesa and created massive, permanent barriers to human infrastructure. They made no attempt to leave the Green Dome, nor did they use their power aggressively against life. The final conclusion, echoing Elijah Thorne's wisdom from 1807, was clear. Xylos was a force of nature to be avoided, not defeated. Its power was absolute, but its goal was simply solitude. The two surveyors, Elijah and David Thorne, who had been expunged from history to protect the Republic, were quietly reinstated, in the deepest, most secret files, as the only men who ever successfully negotiated the existence of the impossible. Their wisdom, that aggressive science must be restrained by moral prudence, became the founding principle of the new Corps.
The American Republic survived, not by conquering the wild interior, but by learning the hardest lesson of all: humility in the face of the unknown. The map of the United States was scarred, its economy disrupted, and its global dominance tempered. But the nation continued, a country built on land that contained not one, but two secret histories. The true America was not the one charted by Lewis and Clark, but the one defined by the two voids: the icy scar of the destroyed winter heart, and the unmoving, green-domed perfection of Xylos, the two monumental remnants of a secret war that the United States had inadvertently stumbled into, survived, and ultimately helped settle into a cold peace. The long silence had been broken, but a new, more enduring peace, built on the acknowledgement of supreme power and the memory of the surveyor's sacrifice, had begun.